All right, guys, the day has finally come. You guys have been waiting for this for a very, very long time. I'm going to reveal the TNF split. I'm very, very cryptic about my split, and the reason for that is because it's not perfect. It's not, completely refined. I switch things up a lot, and so I'm always hesitant to give my split because there's moving pieces all the time. But I'm going to tell you the things that remain stable, the things that move around, why they do that, and hopefully you guys can have a better understanding as to why I train the way that I train. There is no first day of the week because the way that I do my workouts is I always rest on Sunday, or if I'm going to rest, I always rest on Sunday. It's about 4, sometimes 5 days, and because of that, if it's 4 days and then you do the next 2 and then Sunday rolls around, you can't just not do the next 2 days and then restart at 1 on Monday. So I have to take and I just rearrange it so that it's going to be a different one every day. It's not like Monday I do chest. It's Monday I do whatever's next to the split. So we'll just start with one day because I don't really need to tell you guys my day 1. There is no such thing. So we'll start with back. When it comes to my back, usually what I do is I will hit 2 lat exercises. And the reason for that is because of the fact that you have your thoracic and you have your lower lats. Now, obviously, all the divisions of the lats are going to get hit within an exercise. But because of the fact that you can bias, you're going to get some regional hypertrophy differences. I'm going to have one exercise where I have a frontal plane pull, and I'm going to have one exercise where I'm pulling just to here in order to get those thoracic fibers. Now, this could switch as far as which exercise I'm doing, but those 2 things nearly always remain constant. Very, very rarely will I change that. And then after I've done those 2, because of the fact that my lats are just, my structure does not have my lats being flaring automatically. They're relatively thick, but I have to work on them really, really hard to get any flare whatsoever. So if you're a person who has more sweeping lats without you even having to work on them that hard, maybe you don't do your lats first. Maybe you do your mid to upper back first because you're trying to get that part thicker. Me, I get a lot of thickness from the side. It's like things just, you can see it. It comes out already because I have fairly well developed traps and erectors. But I still want to work them better. I still want to get a thicker back. So then I will move on to some sort of row variation. And that row variation is going to have my hands this way, and it's going to have me pulling to a 45 or a 90 or both. Sometimes I will do 2 rows in this day. Sometimes I'll only do 1 row in the day. But I usually get at least one of those. And as long as I've got that done, for me, that's a back day. Now, that doesn't mean that's all I'll do, but as long as I've done that, I'm happy. And then everything else is just additional. Maybe I do a pullover machine where I start here and I pull through to here to get a little bit more lat stimulus. Maybe I do some shrugs just to get a little bit more trap stimulus. But when I say shrugs, I'm not talking about the straight up and down shrugs. You guys never see me do that. Usually it's going to be something that's pulling a little bit more back. But those 3 parts that I talked about first are just, they're non-negotiables for me. I do them every single time. And then I don't really put anything else on back day because it's such a complicated muscle group. Very, very rarely will I ever put a muscle group that's not back on back day. It pretty much has its own day to itself. The next day that I will do is I will do a chest day. And when I say next, again, this is not particular order. I'm not trying to do one before the other or anything like that because it just repeats itself. So there's no need. And this one is interesting because it's a little more variable, more variable than the last one. So typically, as of now, I will start with an incline press variation, which I will do for 2 or 3 sets. And then I will do a flat press variation where I will do that for 1 to 2 sets, simply because I want to get a little bit more upper chest stimulus than the rest. And then I will do a fly variation. And those are my non-negotiable 3. But maybe on certain days I put my flies first. I might even do what I'm probably actually going to end up doing in the next little while is I'm going to keep progressing my presses until they really slow down a lot. And then I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to start with my flies first, just because of the fact that my triceps are very strong and my triceps might be taking over a little bit too much in my presses. Because of that, I want to do some isolation work for my chest. Maybe do that first, see if I get any additional growth out of that. Will it cause additional growth? We don't know. But I like to play around with those variables. And I don't think it will hinder me, if anything. But that's my chest day. And then here's where things get a little bit different. Because sometimes I'll throw in some side delts on that day. Sometimes I'll throw in some triceps on that day. But it's not always going to be that way. Sometimes it'll happen, sometimes it won't. If I'm rushed, then I'll just do the chest and get out. But typically, I'm going to try and get some tricep exercise on that day, simply because of the fact my triceps are pretty strong. So having them on a separate day, I don't necessarily need it, but I'm okay with it if it does happen. My third day is my arms day. Now, like we've talked about throughout that entire rest of the time, my triceps are pretty strong. So because of that, my triceps are always going to be on the back burner on a arms day. So what I might start with is that little machine over there, the preacher curl, or one that I've been starting with more frequently, and not always this one because of the fact that we're obviously at Alpha Land and Planet Fitness is right around the corner from my house, but I nearly always start with a lateral raise variation. And the lateral raise variations that I prefer are the ones that are going to work a little bit more of the lengthened to mid position. And when I say lengthened, I'm not talking about the fact that stretch mediation, right? I'm just talking working it from here to here. But obviously with this one, it's even working in the contracted. So this is by far my favorite side delt variation at the moment. But typically I'll start with that just to make sure that that's the thing that gets the priority through the day. And that's the thing you'll notice throughout my splits is whatever I feel I need to work on the most is going to be the thing that comes earliest in the session. And that's how I base my split. I say, okay, which muscle group would look a little bit more aesthetic if I got it bigger? Which muscle group, if I got it a little bit bigger, wouldn't do as much for me? So me growing my triceps a little bit more would not make me a whole lot more aesthetic. Me growing my side delts a lot more would make me a lot more aesthetic. And that's how I base my entire thinking for my training. And that's why it's always side delts or biceps to start. Biceps are still pretty solid. So typically I start with the side delts because those could stand to gain the most from being placed earlier and getting more growth. So we'll have a side delt variation, we'll have a bicep curl, and then I'll typically hit a rear delt. So that will be done on the pec deck, or the reverse pec deck, I should say. And I'll hit that with my TNF Classic. After I've hit that, then what I will do is I will go back to the biceps. Now, I shouldn't say that. I will go back to the elbow flexors. And what I'll do is I'll do a variation that is a hammer curl variation. Typically, I will do that on the preacher curl machine again, just because of the stability that it has, and it will just keep everything exactly locked in where it needs to be. But if I had to, doing it as a dumbbell variation or a cable variation, I'm okay with that. I just personally prefer doing it on the preacher curl machine. Actually, let's show you that exercise, because that one, I think, is one that a lot of people don't use, but is so incredibly good. Let me show you all the advantages that this exercise has. This is how much I love this exercise. We're talking about the TNF split, and I want to show you an individual exercise. So, first things first. Do you see this right here? Because it takes and it angles through here, you have something to push off of. So you've already got a little bit of additional stability there. And then you've got your entire arm laid out on here, keeping it stable. Because of the fact that the brachialis does not cross the shoulder joint, it doesn't matter that your arms are out in front of your body at all. Like, that's one of the things that people talk about when it comes to preacher curl. They're like, oh, well, then you're not necessarily working at as much length, so you want something that can do that. You don't have to worry about that with the preacher curl. So you can take and you can just focus purely on the work that you have to do here. There is no other exercise for the brachialis that is going to work it as directly or as stably as this, in my opinion. Now, you could argue that there's a little bit of an angle here that might, too much quibbling, all right? You don't need to think too hard about it. Assuming you are pulling through with good intention, you just can't beat that exercise. So, little side note from the TNF split. But after we've done those, then we will hit 1 or 2 tricep exercises, dependent on what we did on chest day. So, chest day, we said we hit all the chest movements, and then maybe we'll hit triceps after. So if we did hit triceps after, if we hit the triceps completely, then I won't even do triceps on this day. But if we did only 1 exercise for the tris, then we will hit tris for 2 exercises on this day. And the 2 exercises that I currently do the most are going to be tricep extensions, and they're going to be JM presses. Now, you guys already know how I perform my tricep extensions. Usually I'll do a short position, then a mid position, and I'll turn around and do a lengthen. Doesn't mean you have to do that. Honestly, if you just did one of those positions, you'd probably be fine. It's just something I really like doing. But I will typically use a Vulcan grip when I get the chance, and that's simply because of the fact that now you can focus it completely on the tris and nothing else, and it's like having a cuff. If you prefer single arm variations for your tris where you're just doing this, perfectly fine, they're great, but I like to kill two birds with one stone, work everything through. Can you see that? Well, man. Sorry. As you guys can see, triceps are a strong point for me. That's why I don't worry about them as much. But we have this, and then we have the JM press. Simple reason for that being that the long head is involved in shoulder extension, right? So when the shoulder is in a fixed spot and you're doing this, all right, you're going to get a lot of long head work. Biarticular for anybody who wants to sound smart. When it comes to your presses, if the shoulder joint is moving at the same time, then what that's going to do is that's going to focus a little bit more on the medial and the lateral heads. So if the shoulder is moving through the movement, you're going to end up biasing a little bit more of the medial to lateral. If the shoulder is fixed, you're going to end up biasing a little bit more of the long head. And because of that, you're going to get more complete triceps development if you have both of those exercises in there. And that completely covers the first 3 days. Now, again, this is why I've always been so cryptic on my split, because it does change from time to time. This is where things get a little bit different, because lately I've just been doing one leg day. For a while I was doing two, but it was like they would be on specific days of the week and everything else would order itself around that. But lately I've just been doing one leg day, so we'll keep it simple and we'll leave it to that. And on my leg day, what I'll typically hit is I'll hit a hack squat variation or a Smith machine. The only reason I hit Smith machine is because of the fact that there is no hack squats at Planet Fitness. That's it. There's nothing special about it. It's not better or anything like that. There just is not a hack squat machine at Planet Fitness. So that's been the one that's been in my rotation most often right now. The other thing that I'll hit is I'll hit a leg extension, and that will cover pretty well everything I need for the quads. As similar to what we talked about when it came to the triceps, the quads work almost the exact same way, which it's funny because like you have your biceps femoris, which is here, and you have your quadriceps, which is here, and with your arms, you have your biceps breakup, and then you have your triceps, right? So they're both limbs, but they have similar ways of moving, and if you understand one, you can understand the other. It's pretty cool stuff. But we will hit the leg extension, we will hit the hack squat. The other thing that we will hit is we will nearly always hit an adductor machine, and we will always hit a hamstring curl. After that point, depending on how much time we have and what our energy levels are like, we might hit something like this, which is a hip thrust, just to get a little bit of additional glute work. We might hit calves, but calves can also be placed on other days, just randomly as I need. I should do them more often, but everybody skips calves, and I'm no different. And then the other exercise that we sometimes do, sometimes don't, again, this usually depends on how much energy I have overall, is just a straight up RDL or SLDL. And that could be with free weight, but lately I've been doing it more often with a Smith machine, just because it's a little bit more stable, takes a little bit less energy, and just allows me to place a little bit more emphasis on the muscle groups I'm trying to work and a little bit less overall fatigue. And we're getting already a lot of fatigue from the other things. But because there's so much involved with the legs, you can see why I've often done this with 2 days. Because some days I want to focus a little bit more on the hamstrings. Some days I want to focus a little bit more on the quads. And because of that, I used to have it where it would be like Tuesday was a hamstring-oriented leg day, and Saturday was a quad-oriented leg day, and everything else that I just talked about with my split ordered around that. So it was just like day 1 might be Monday, and then I would do my leg day, and then day 2, day 3, back to day 1, and then another leg day, and then so you see how everything would kind of order around that. So this is why I have been so overall hesitant to tell you guys what my split is. Because if I tell you something and then you see me do something else, everybody's going to hop on it. And that's why I wanted to only do this, if I was going to do it, in a full video where I could explain to you exactly what it is we're talking about. Because everybody's looking for things all the time to say, well, you said you do this and you're not doing this. You said you do this, you're not doing that. My current is just a 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's variability on those 4 days. But there's also times where I decide that I'm going to put a little bit more emphasis into my legs overall. And those ones would have a quad-oriented day and a hamstring-oriented day. And those other 1, 2, 3 days will order themselves around it. I know it sounds confusing. If you wrote it all out as I was going along, it'll be a little bit easier to understand. But that is just my split, okay? This is not me saying this is the best split. This is not me saying this is what you should all go do. Because this is quite literally made for me. I made this exactly for me. So you might have completely different emphases that you want to do. You can take principles from what I'm doing. That's completely fine, but make it work for your goals. You're not going to have the same physique as me. Very few of you are going to have the same strong points and same weak points as I do. Sometimes, like, people, like, there are some people that I work with who they try to do my stuff and they're like, man, like, I don't really understand, like, why I'm not getting what I want to. I'm like, well, you're not working with your physique. You have great lats and a terrible upper back, and you're trying to do my stuff? That makes no sense, because my stuff is completely oriented around my lats being something that I want to bring out, or my chest, my upper chest being something that I need to improve upon. You have an amazing chest. You should be focusing more time into your arms. But in the end, there is no one split that is better than another. Push-pull legs is not better than push-pull legs. Arms is not better than bro split. Everything has to be oriented towards your particular goals. And once you understand that, you will understand there is nothing special about the TNF split relative to push-pull legs or push-pull legs arms or full body. Like, there are so many variances that you can do with your individual split that you should always be looking for the splits that works best for you, and then work with overarching principles to make that split work to the best of its abilities. And it really is, as much as it sounds complicated in the way that I explain what I do, it really is that simple for you. Man, there's a lot of information, but I hope you guys got something out of it. Now you guys know the secret is out. That is the TNF split. TNF out.